My name's Lou Stoppard. I'm obviously absolutely thrilled to be here with two of my favourite men in fashion. We're going to be talking about the past, present and future of the Jordan effect on sport, culture, performance. Air Jordan's obviously a complete Nike icon, and it's a shoe that's had such a big impact on culture and a real big impact on Virgil and Kim. These are two men who obviously need absolutely no introduction, but just in case anyone hasn't done their homework, Virgil Abloh, trained architect, DJ, mastermind behind the fashion label Off-White, which he launched in 2013. It's crazy to think that it only launched in 2013, given its meteoric rise. Virgil's celebrated for his DIY aesthetic and his real understanding of sort of how today's generation consume and educate themselves. His love affair for Air Jordans is well known, and he talks about Michael Jordan as a kind of Superman. Virgil's also, I think, one of the nicest men in fashion, which is really nice. Kim Jones is up there also as one of the nicest men in fashion. He's Louis Vuitton's artistic director on the men's collection. He's an avid sneaker collector and actually a collector of all different kinds of fashion, has an amazing archive, which I think we're going to talk about a little bit today, and an amazing knowledge of sportswear and streetwear. And his innovative approach to design has bridged fashion and sportswear, obviously under the umbrella of such an iconic luxury brand. So let's welcome Kim and Virgil. I think you'll...
Put him in the middle.
Sorry.
Yeah.
Okay, so first question. I know this sounds a bit like couples therapy, but tell me how you guys met. Did you bond over a love of the Air Jordan?
We met backstage it was the 15th anniversary, I think, of Bathing Ape. Was it 2007? You probably know Fraser.
No.
And it was with Kanye, Virgil, you, Nigo, everyone, and it was just like a fun party and just got on straight away. It was really...
Yeah, Japan trip.
Yeah, it was a lot of good fun.
And Kim, tell me what you first thought when you saw some of Virgil's Off-White work.
Well, when I saw the shoes he's done for Nike, I was very jealous because they're so good.
That's a big compliment coming from such a sneaker fan. Tell me about your first experiences and interactions with the Air Jordan. Do you remember the first shoe you got? Do you remember when you first bought a pair, how long you had it for? Because you were sending sketches in, weren't you?
Yeah, I was that kid that was like, Nike was like the lofty company that was like, you would never reach, because for me, I'm born in '80, so Jordan was like the Superman. He was like the physical person that was doing like impossible feats, but he was also like our local basketball player. I was seeing Michael Jordan 20 feet away, like shoot free throws. That's like seeing him play, going to the old stadium and the new stadium, lose. And so these shoes that came out that became this global phenomenon were sort of like, that's what I was like going to sleep at night, like looking at the bed.
So you came to the shoe kind of through the man?
Yeah, exactly. It was purely like those first campaigns, I was seeing like the first nuance of, Jordan getting banned and wearing gold chains, like that happened. And this was like the thing that you could buy to be close to something that was happening. And it was a phenomenon,
I imagine it's different for you, Kim, because obviously Virgil has the Chicago link, but for you it must be much more of sort of...
It was a bit different for me because I was in England, and it was like I was a straight edger, and it was part of the uniform of straight edgers at the time. And
explain just for the sake
of... Straight edgers, it's like a sort of hardcore sort of punk scene thing, and it was like just really... everyone wore Jordans, everyone, and then it was sort of just, it was everywhere, but it was more of a cultural thing than sort of a sports thing to us. So it was looking at it in terms of that thing of, everyone was wearing them and they'd be on every record cover or every sort of like thing, and it was just like these objects you had to have, but no one really had that much money, so we'd save up and we'd share them with friends and stuff like that, and just like, get the toothbrush out and clean them and things like that all the time, so they looked as clean as possible. And it was just like, there were things you loved, and you knew the design was really good, and it was a different way of looking at it.
And it's interesting, you kind of talked about it there with your two different answers to that question, but as a shoe, it is something that sits between sort of style and sport and has all these different things within culture, from something that's about performance to something that's very much about aesthetics and subculture. And I guess that's one of the most interesting things about sort of sneaker history, is how it can mean so many different things to different people.
Yeah, Michael, just picking off of what he said, like Michael Jordan was like maybe the most punk basketball player of his time. You know, where he decided to wear the length of his shorts, like, changed the length. You know, he played the game with grace, but with confidence, and you know, he was a stylistic, like, and he has an opinion. He's not just like here, toss me these shoes, I'm gonna wear these. He's like, you know, the history is like, it's a perfect merger of like athletic innovation, Nike, and then you have this figure of a guy who's gonna transcend a sport. And so I think it's easy for us as like the culture, sort of yin to the yang, to attach and like put it on a pedestal.
And what do you both think, we were talking about this a little bit before, but what do you both think about sort of how these stories have now entered the sort of high fashion world? And there's all this talk about, you know, sportswear and high fashion, these very loose terms that kind of mean nothing, but you've both been sort of at the forefront of that and carved spaces out that maybe didn't exist before. And you talked about brands that you admired, like, you talked about Stussy and things like that you were seeing when you were growing up, and now this is such a part of the language of sort of fashion week and high fashion.
I mean, for me, it's just that thing of always, whenever I've done stuff, it's been half and half. It's never been one thing because, you know, logos are logos, and like a Nike swoosh is the same as a monogram or something to me in terms of the registration that people see it, and it's just always been the natural thing. I mean, when I was at college, I was really, you know, I loved Helmut Lang and McQueen and all those things, but I also loved, you know, Supreme. I loved, you know, Bathing Ape, Good Enough. Mainly, you know, a lot of the Japanese things which you wouldn't really find, and I was working at Gimme 5 at the time, so, you know, I had access to things that other people couldn't see, and it was the idea of, you know, good design is good design. It's not necessarily where it comes from the street or whether it comes from fashion. It's just there.
And talk to me about, sorry, go ahead. What
I think it's important and it's perfect. I don't know what the intro was because we were like stuck in the hallway, but I think it's important to note that the designer that I always wanted in the like modern industry is Kim Jones. Like, I'm not sure if you guys know the full history, but when we're talking about, like, you know, it's like a common phrase, like high fashion and streetwear, that's him. Like, that's him in an industry.
It's so embarrassing for Paul.
But that's him.
This is someone I respect.
But this is my goal, is to sort of communicate. You know, I've slept on his couch. I've like forced him to teach me, like front room in Maida Vale, been like, spend a summer sitting there, like Kim Jones, Umbro. Like, Google all those pieces sort of like predate now, and I know it's like common in vogue and like hip hop or whatever to like cite these like high fashion designers, but not many of them were at Gimme 5. Not many of them have, you know, know what Bathing Ape.
I remember getting all the old Japanese magazines out for you and Kanye, and we're going through them with post-it notes.
Yeah, it's like but we found somebody in the industry before they used the term streetwear or luxury. He was practicing that, going through, like bringing forth like street culture ideas through the high fashion system. So, you know, this talk for me is about how can us as like a younger generation plug into this sort of, you know, industry that we put on a pedestal, which is sort of like high fashion.
Exactly.
And I think it's important to know, we all love Helmut Lang, Margiela, you know, XYZ, but in a contemporary space like sportswear, Umbro, and like runway shows, that was only Kim Jones. Before it was like, hey, we're going to collaborate with a sportswear thing.
I mean, for me, I just always think of good design is good design, and people want it anyway. So whether it's high fashion or whether it's like streetwear, whatever it's called, it's like, or sportswear, if it's a great product, people want it. Exactly. And that's how I always think whenever I do anything.
It's so interesting hearing Virgil talk about it. Did you feel at the time when you were sort of especially, you know, when you moved from Dunhill into Vuitton, did you feel a sort of a sense of being a trailblazer with that? You know, and just someone who has like an encyclopedic knowledge of sneakers and who collects Bathing Ape, being in that world.
For me, I mean, it was just like I was very lucky because I got access to a lot of things that other people didn't. You know, I had like Lee McQueen mentor me. I had like Michael Koppelman at Gimme 5 show me all these introduced me to people like Nigo, Hiroshi, Jun Takahashi, all these people that I really admire and respect. And it was like, so you fuse all that together and you just, you know, you create your own thing as well. And it was just the idea of, you know, thinking what my friends want to wear, what, you know, if you're going to do Vuitton, you know, it has to be what the value of it is because it's an expensive product, and just think of things like that. And, you know, a practical way. I'm quite logical, I guess, in the way I work, and I always have been, because it's just something that's inherent in me.
And it's interesting when you were talking about Michael Jordan, you talked about him being like a punk and bringing this sort of, this disruptive spirit into the game. And is that an ethos that you think is important to you as you've sort of approached life as a designer?
Yeah, for sure. My motivation is like, it's a bit of the angst to feel like that I don't belong, or more to the fact that our generation doesn't belong. Because it's important to know, we're coming off the era where it's like high fashion or brands are inspired by us, and then we're just consuming what's sort of registered back to us, which was fine until the advent of like an influencer. Many of my friends here can who might have like a little reach on Instagram, can wear one thing and it transcends what the house was bringing down to it. And so I made a conscious decision that like not in my lifetime will I just be a consumer, that I wanted to sort of trailblaze and have one of us at the end of a Parisian runway just saying like, hey, put us on the timeline as not just consumers. Or
well, you've always had a very clear vision. Even when we were working with Kanye, you had everything laid out and organised prior to it being done. So it's kind of, for me, it was always inevitable that Virgil would do his own thing. And it was like, every time I see it, I'm really proud, and I see someone, it's the sheer volume of people I see wearing it that makes me feel, happy, because he's a great guy and he's worked super hard. And so you see it everywhere. It makes me, proud of him.
Thanks.
Oh,
but
nice.
I toss it back.
But I think one thing that's quite interesting is the sense of sort of speaking to a generation that maybe didn't feel spoken to before. That seems to be something that you're both sort of talking about.
Yeah, it's like neat, like Bond Street, the streetwear shop. I need a nod from someone from London. That's because I don't like Bond Street, right? Bond International.
Yeah.
I was a kid, showed up. My cousin owned a record shop called Deal Real, a couple blocks up in Soho. And, I was just like looking for anything T-shirts, a New York Thing or Stussy. And I come across a store called Bond, and I was like, and then obviously the Bape and all that. And I was like, man, there's a community. Like, from Benji, like London, kid, you guys hold it so far down that it's like, it's just a local community thing. It's the way that you wear the clothes, and I was inspired by that, and this international community of streetwear. So that, obviously, predating what you see now, predating Bin Trill, Pyrex Vision. I spent 10 years with the passport, traveling, finding these local communities. So now...
Do they remind you of sort of where you grew up in a way, like having this sense of like, being slightly outside of the action in some way? Yeah,
it's like, but it's anyone's story. What you were in high school and the years coming up and what you wanted to sort of be could be different. And I found the community within kids that generally like the same sneakers or generally were into the same music scene or something like that. And that, I think is inspiring to both of us.
I mean, I think the thing which is interesting in terms of how we met or how you meet other people that inspire you is it's never a forced meeting, it's just natural, and it's sort of like you gravitate towards each other. And I think that's the thing that I really love about my job is like I meet all these amazing people constantly that inspire me.
Yeah.
And I work a lot in collaborating and doing stuff because I enjoy doing it. I enjoy working with different people, learning different things, and just it's the interaction is exciting. You have to think about how you enjoy working as well as what people that are going to consume things are too.
Yeah.
Just talking about collaboration, because one thing that's quite interesting, particularly about this project, is you must have been pretty terrified in a way, taking on really, really iconic shoes that you'd known and loved, and tweaking the design. And I guess that's something you can identify with because you collaborate with people that you have a huge amount of respect for. Someone like working with Christopher Nemeth's archive, where that's someone who you've admired, and you're in a way putting your own twist on something. And I just wonder how you approach a project like this, like taking something like the Jordan and thinking, actually, I'm going to disrupt that and change it.
Yeah, well, you used a key word in which I preach, because my goal is that, ironically, you're sitting here, but my goal is that off of activations like this, that there's 10 more Kim Jones. But basically, what streetwear is basically like we make clothing brands out of our own means, right? So like we call it like Spring Summer 17, and it ends up on Hypebeast, and it's like a collection. But you know, here's someone that's been doing it at the highest level. So it's our training wheels to sort of get up there. And my hope is that, you know, it all extends so that there's more in an industry that come from our school of thought. And I don't think of streetwear as like a demeaning, it might be a label, but like let's just pretend it's an art movement, because that's what it is.
Because you said before you think of some of these shoes like works of art.
Yeah, well, you know, everyone has a memory to all these shoes. You know, they followed our transitions between different music scenes, you know, Kurt Cobain wearing Chuck Taylors, like infused energy into that shoe. It's not a regular shoe after Kurt Cobain, you know, after, you know, it's a rock, or, you know, Air Max, rave shoes, Jordan, you know, the history of what that means, Air Force Ones, New York City. And for me, designing, you know, I called it potential career suicide. Like sneakers are the most sacred thing. Everyone has a valid opinion. Who am I to think that I could approach not only 10, but like 1, you know, so.
Because this is the first time anyone's done that many, isn't it?
Yeah, it was a challenge, but I think the important thing is it's like, I think this collaboration will go in a historical space, because it's the first time, you know, Nike, which is a company that's based on innovation. These are athletic performance things. They're not, they didn't start as style things. So it's a trust that I'm grateful for, that they're like, here, and instead of being radical and just saying like, hey, I want to chop these up for my own design integrity, or chop these up for my own like well-being, it's like, hey, I have to like make sure that they pass through your collective filter. But also, you know, I used it as a vehicle to sort of storytell about Nike. You know, the Helvetica Air is not just a stylistic choice. That's a dialogue with the founding innovation of the company, you know. And of course we've lived with it, but you know, Nike Air, that's an important detail to discuss. Or the fact that it's the amount of craft that goes into these shoes is usually covered. So one of the design techniques was to show you how amazing that these shoes are put together. A lot of the materials are just removed away, so you're getting something that feels in process. So that was like the ethos behind that.
It's interesting, Virgil talked then about this idea of like potential career suicide, and you have collaborated with these amazing, like even like the Chapman brothers, and talk to me, because it is a similar concept as approaching something that is something you've massively admired, and now you're working to sort of, you know, put a twist on it or change it. And how do you approach that in your work? Because you are one of the most collaborative designers that sort of I think is working in fashion.
I just go with my gut, and it's like if something doesn't work, it doesn't work, and it's like you'll get a bit of hate for a while, but then you carry on. I mean, you've got to be like that, because otherwise you just be like, you know, I can't do anything, and you just have to take. I mean, that's the one thing, is like taking chances, but you know, if they're sort of, you know, a conscious risk that you know is pretty much going to work, it's like, and you know, the people that I do collaborate with have been very open and listened to me, and you know, most of them I've known for years and years, so it's kind of like it's not so difficult, but you know, you just do it. I don't worry about stuff anymore, because if you get a bit of hate, it's like you get a bit of hate for like, you know, a few days or a week, and then everyone's on to the next thing. You've got to just deal with it.
But that's important to know. Like, I love this conversation, because usually I'm doing them in like a...
I mean, I think anyone that does any sort of
technical,
visual...
like, it's good for you guys just to hear, like, when we signed up to say that we want to be designers, that's basically a life of torture. I know you guys want to do that. Yeah, now there's great things about it, but imagine...
You're really inspiring them.
Well, no, it's just reality. I'll whip it into something that's more inspirational. But like I'm here, it's like we line a fire every fall, winter, spring, summer to show 200 things that come out with like good music, no model trips, you know, that you think about it for forever, that you're trying to throw a pass like further than culture is at the time you see it. But then also when it ends up in stores, you want to purchase it. And Tremaine, my friend here in the front,
hi Tremaine,
he said like a crazy awesome comment, like, because all we all do is like rate brands. We're like, this is good, this is bad. It's like the theme of every dinner conversation or beer is like, that person sucks now. You know, there are people at the end of those figurative comments, and we're just sitting there all day traveling, trying to put 200 ideas out. But Tremaine said it best. He was like, the fact of the matter is like when you see a collection, there's only like 7 things that you're actually going to buy anyways, no matter if it's the most favorite thing. It's like our profession is basically just trying to make Christmas presents.
My best advice is don't read the comments in the Daily Mail.
Yeah,
that's all I could say.
Or hype beast.
Yeah, it's interesting though, because you make it sound like it's this like torturous process, but I do think there's a part for both of you which I find very interesting, and having sort of got to know you guys, I find it very sort of quite inspiring about both of you. Is there is this real interest in sort of educating, like you talked about it in terms of sort of telling stories about these shoes, and that's really a passion for you as well. You know, like some of the collaborations you've done haven't been sort of blockbuster, like Christopher Nemeth. I imagine there's a lot of kids who have absolutely no idea who that is.
I mean, he was one of my
Bowery.
heroes, so that's why I chose to do it. Plus, the graphic worked with the Vuitton graphic, so it just made sense.
But it's like using the voice that you guys have to sort of cut through a lot of what can be that sort of, you know, negativity and hype and comment culture into something where if, you know, one kid ends up knowing who Lee Bowery is, great. You know, that I think that's quite an interesting ethos. Just
I mean, you know, the one thing that that I did that was the thing with Hiroshi, which was the fragment stuff, is like, I don't think anyone realised how popular he is around the whole world, because it was like such a success, and it was like a very quiet success, apart from in Japan, where it just like completely cleared the shelves, and it's kind of like, you know, there's a respect for people do know their stuff now because they educate themselves, and it's like funny because, you know, I did my own collection for 8 years before I then went into work in houses, and a lot of kids now that are like 16 or 18 will get in touch about, you know, my old stuff and ask questions, and they've searched out, and actually it's quite hard to find on the internet, so I took a lot of it off. I took all the shows off and everything because I didn't want people copying it all the time. So basically, if I wanted to do it again, so, you know, it's just like things like that, and it's like, so people really do research and look at stuff, and, you know, they're going elsewhere to find stuff, not just looking online, which I think is really, you know, you have to see stuff when you work with products and clothes. It's not just about looking at a picture, and that's the one thing that I always say to people, especially when I'm with students in a college or whatever, is like, go and look at the book. Don't just Google it on the internet and then see what's on the next page, or go and look at try and find the garment, because then you'll see how it's made, and it's, you know, then you enjoy it more, because it's like when you're more hands-on and you're creative, it's exciting.
And for me, like, you know, I'm like in the crux of streetwear. You know, I take it and I own it, and like the thing about it, there's so many stories that predate now. You know, like there's 35 brands that failed off the back of Off-White being able to get to where it is. So instead of me sort of putting on this premise like, hey, I just made a couple T-shirts and gave a few to a friend, you know, that Hiroshi, who he's mentioning, and Nigo made that concept up. You know, The Last Orgy. There's these things. Aaron, New York City, Brand Anything, is like a pioneer who was like making T-shirts, Lower East Side, New York City, that, you know, at that time there wasn't an opportunity for a line to be that big to sell out and finance the whole thing. You know, Nom de Guerre, there's like different local things that were just prior to their time. So for me, my idea of collaborations, pretty much every collection is me getting on the internet, cold calling people that were from that previous era to like come back and like, hey, let's use Off-White as an education device to sort of bridge a gap. And that's, you know, that's always been how I thought that, you know, it can take it off this figurative fashion thing and actually support a community.
But you design in quite an interesting way, because I've always thought it's a bit like how musicians sample. Like there's this thing in fashion about referencing, which is this kind of awkward thing where you reference but you don't tend to give credit properly. You know, you just kind of casually nod to something and everyone knows what the reference is, but sometimes no one talks about it. But you do this interesting thing where you're like into Peter Saville, so you call Peter Saville up and you work with him, and it's like you let him become a part of the sort of the music of that collection. Same with Ben Kelly or what have you. And that's it's an interesting way of designing.
Again, I think streetwear is an art practice, and I'll keep thinking that until otherwise. It's on the same level as any other movement that you would peg to things in the art world. You know, Duchamp, ready-made. And it's like, I won't let, it's more like, a generation of people that basically didn't go to fashion school or didn't come from traditional means in fashion, the easy way to write it off is that it's not fashion and that it's like high street, it's not high fashion. I think that there are seminal moments in this way of making clothes. Like, you can't tell me that, like I said it, that Supreme isn't my Louis Vuitton. You know, Stussy, like growing up with Stussy, that's like teenage years with a skateboard, those were brands that were important to me. You know, I obviously love both, and I think that they should merge. And so I just want to make sure that the door is open for a room of these kids to feel like they can design fashion and be on a runway too. And then, like, particularly as you said, it's like a show review for a new collection can be anonymous and say, this is that, or it shouldn't be this or that. That was shorthand for not getting in trouble. But, you know, like, but, you know, it's like, it's freedom. Like, I think we all, fashion, as we said backstage, it's like it should be exciting as it was when the golden era is. And I think it's safe to say that Kim has made the most relevant, you know, like showing with on the runway of that felt like it was what we've all been looking for, something that felt relatable and new and actually reflective of what's happening on the street.
Well, it's where you see clothes. That's why I always think about it. And when people say about streetwear, it's like, well, where else are people going to wear clothes? You know, it's a pretty stupid. That's why I think it's a stupid term. It's like, you know, it's like, you know, what the thing about street is, what I like about streetwear is it's very authentic. It comes from like a genuine place, and for me, that's the thing that's important about it and why I love it. And whenever I do anything, I think about the authenticity or what brand it is, what the authenticity of the brand is, and that's really important. Yeah,
and I always mention that, like, and I said it yesterday, I'll say it because I learned it from Peter Saville, long talks with Peter. Basically, you know that, like, fashion was invented. It's not something that, like, and he described it as, like, ask your grandmother how many pairs of sneakers she owns. There's no concept to have more than two. You know, like that. It's a generational thing to how we got here. So Yves Saint Laurent, you know, there's designers and everyone's doing couture. It's a very high a crash course in the lineage of these terms that we're now living in. It's like couture was like that's what fashion was. This what we're talking about isn't as you said, ladies who have an exorbitant. They're buying it like art. It's very protected. Yves Saint Laurent says, I got a concept, ready to wear. Like the clothes that women are wearing to see couture, like that's important. So then there's all these like ready to wear brands, you know, and that's why we have labels, like those houses in Paris, like they all, so Yves Saint Laurent made, that's only 50 years old. That was 50 years ago. Not a long time in the lineage of this. And then I think that streetwear is the extension of couture. You know, now it resonates. Even in the last 5 years, it seemed like a trend. You know, like editors or the industry was sort of like, oh, this is like that's like Tommy John street style photos outside. But the problem is, like when people were mixing high fashion and wearing brands like Nike in an interesting way, I think it birthed.
It's just clothes that people want to wear, isn't it?
Yeah,
And
so
fit with modern life.
There should be streetwear shows. You know, like it should be, like imagine if this room took it upon itself. We do streetwear shows. Like we're turning our back to the ready to wear that doesn't relate to us. We have our own industry. You know that there would be more. There'd be like millionaires in here in like 2 seconds.
We need to start that, make it happen.
SHOWstudio, Nick Knight. It's recording live.
I'm conscious that I want to let some people ask some questions, but I have a few more. Namely, how many pairs of trainers do you have in your collection? Oh,
God, I don't know. I've got like a storage full of them, and I don't know, Jordan-wise, I've probably got about 100 pairs. And then I bought my first pair of Jordan 1s in a flea market in Oakland with mint condition in the box for $8, which I still kept in the box, and so that's kind of...
You never won them?
No, because I mean they're my size as well, but it's just like you know, it's kind of those sorts of things of just going around the world and finding stuff. I've got pairs I do wear, but it's just renovated the place that they were in, so they're all in storage at the moment. Maybe about 600-700
Don't
pairs.
reveal the location. I think
No.
that would be best.
Anyone got size 8 feet?
But just talk to me a little bit about this impetus that you have to collect, because it's not like you just collect sneakers. You also have quite a diverse set of stuff, from punk stuff through to sort of sportswear clothing through to.
Well, they're all things that just I'm interested in. It's never something I've never gone out to say, hey, I'm going to collect them. It's just you accumulate. I think that's the thing. And then when I finally realise, actually, I've got quite a lot, it's a proper collection, then I start archiving it and getting everything photographed, just because it's like I lend stuff to museums, and I want people to, I have an archive of streetwear, which is very different to the streetwear we're talking about, which is what people used to wear clubbing in the 80s and, in the 70s. And it's kind of like the way that things are made and the pattern cutting and the fabrics and stuff. It's like,
Talk to me about some of the designers that you're referring to.
From, World's End, Let It Rock Sex, Lee Bow, Rachel Auburn, Nemeth,
and they were peacocks in their own right, that sense of dressing up.
A lot of it going out was to, outcompete other people.
Yeah.
So it was kind of, it's the same sort of thing, but in a different way. And it's like, I let students see stuff, and I know a lot of younger designers that are graduated and want to come out and see stuff to be inspired, and so they can see how things are made and stuff like that. It's like, it's a joy to see how excited things make people. So for me, they're just things that I have that.
They're really remarkable. You have Johnny Rotten's mohair jumper and stuff, don't you?
Yeah,
pretty good.
It's like I've having this fortunate having Kim as a mentor, seeing him open boxes of clothes seditionary, things that are popular way after the time. It's like he's just had in physical condition that
he left me in the room with it once, and it was probably the best hour of my life.
They're art pieces. These are seminal. This predates what I call my golden era. But that era, when I hear about the sex shop, when I do research Vivienne Westwood, these were clothing movements that happened from culture.
Yeah,
and I'm the same way. How he approaches that, I'm like, if I see anything, I buy it and I archive it. I'm just the same way. I want the craziest archive of 2012 streetwear. After T-shirts.
I've got a lot of old Goodenough and Bathing Ape, which is from the the very first collections, which is still in boxes and stuff. Which I also think is equally as important as the more sort of rare things, because it was so well designed.
Yeah, in 30 years, think about these things that we just, the millions of hoodies that you already have, but there's going to be one that was this described our time period, when we were all jumping around to Travis Scott, what was that? And then people will have it and bring it back out and be like, oh, that, and that's what I think is a testament, these Nike shoes have recorded, they recorded a certain time period. And I think that shows you how far off, I don't think Nike would refer to themselves as a fashion brand, but we've adopted some value to it. And so,
which is steeped in cultural history.
I don't see it as fashion, I see it as cultural.
Yeah,
because it's crossing that sort of path, and for me that's what's really interesting and exciting about it, and the fact you did all of them.
Because everyone says something different about music or sport or what's happening in the street, what's happening in fact, there's so many stories to be told. On that note, look how, that was we timed that, it was great. Does anyone have any questions? Just a note, I'm just personally really bored of hearing Kim have to talk about Vuitton Supreme, so if people could just not ask about that, that would be great. But if anyone has any questions, that would be really fantastic.
It's hard because, you talking about the 10 or just in general?
In general.
It has to be the Jordan. That shoe, it changed, the sport, but it also has a strong cultural connection to me personally. That, and everyone is different, but that shoe sort of transcended a few more different layers than most for me. Tinker Hat, the way it was designed, the fact that it started this whole idea of a player having a shoe, the year, every playoff colorway, and the fact that it can be, led the market in retro, that the fact that it gained after years of it coming out, that immediately they were bringing it back out.
Do you see it foreshadowing a lot of the way that, you talked about a shoe being attached to a player? Do you see it foreshadowing some of the ways that we think about sort of collaboration or sportswear today?
Yeah, I think it's like the ultimate trophy. It transcends, like, if you win championships. It transcends the court, which is a unique commentary that how these things resonate for us, the consumers, and on the street, can transcend an actual, game where they work hand in hand.
Next question, Tremaine.
Well, I mean, it was kind of like, I have to say it's when I was in China and I was in a fake market, because we'd go and look at them to see what they're copying quite a lot. And it was like, and there was just tons of Off-White. And I thought, well, if they've got this all here, then he's doing really fucking well. And I thought that was like kind of, for me, that was kind of the sort of moment.
You were meant to say you held a piece and it was made in Italy, it was so beautiful.
No, I mean, well, that is like, I always, whenever he does something, I'm like, I need that now, please, Virgil. It's always, can we do a swap? And it's like,
trade barter.
And then, but that China, because it was like literally stall after stall of Off-White, and I just thought, he's done it. And it was so fast. I was really, really like, just, impressed, because not many people do. It's a hard thing to start a label now, and then to maintain that and get people still excited. And I think that's one thing you've done incredibly well.
Thank you. Appreciate it.
Yeah, it's interesting because you mentioned, sorry, I have some more questions, but you mentioned like before that there are lots of brands that didn't work, then there were like 20 that, went before. What, it's a really hard question for you to answer yourself, but what is it about Off-White that you think resonated? Was it timing? Was it, what was it that worked?
It's the same piece of advice that I give, because I want to mentor. I want there to be more of us showing, and it's really about being critical. At the end of the day, if you see it come out, it's going through like a rapid, sort of like algorithm of people that hate it or think that I'm not a designer. So what it is when I think of something or propose an idea, I'm like 20 times like naysaying it, refining it, and then it's out. And so. And now it's after time I'm building a vocabulary. So that's that. But like Kim said, it's like I don't read comments, I don't read reviews, I don't read anything positive. To me, the 17-year-old version of myself didn't think that this was possible. So every day that I'm able to sort of like make an idea and see it come out, that's enough fulfillment.
That's nice.
I travel constantly and I look at youth culture a lot in terms of reference, and there is a lot of homogenization, I think, because of people seeing everything all over the world, but the availability of products all over the world isn't always the same. So you do get local interest. I mean, I go to Cape Town a lot, which I've got a lot of friends that are in their mid-20s, and it's like, see how they dress, and it's like, actually it's a completely different way because they've come from a place where there's been apartheid before, and actually everyone's merged together and are working together and creating really interesting stuff. So for me, that was super inspiring to see how everyone's just got together and doing stuff, and it creates a completely new style for me, which I think is interesting. But there's places all over the world I see that, and it's kind of, like in Sao Paulo and places like that, where people go out and make stuff because they don't have money and things like that, and it's like, there's lots of youth schemes that I work with around the world as well, just like, to help them create things that then they can turn into stuff, because it's like a really easy thing to help brainstorm things like that. And it's, for me, I was very lucky I had some very good people mentor me, so I like to do the same thing back, I think, like Virgil does.
Yeah. I think that I'm an eternal like optimist, so even in that question for like the homogenization, yeah, it seems like a negative thing, but it's sort of like, look at it the opposite. Like, you could travel to Chicago, Illinois, Tokyo, Japan, Paris, just by the code that you guys are styled yourself in. Find a friend to go listen to Travis Scott loud. And that's why I DJ, because I see the camaraderie or the link, like kid with like dirty Chuck Taylors shows up and you're like, hey, I'm trying to get, it's like if you look, you're a community. You're actually you outnumber like politics, which is cool. So like, I'd say that homogenization is like, it's a new global community that's a positive side effect of Instagram. So that's that. But for those of you that want to sort of get ahead, get notoriety, and do your dreams, like, just play the opposite. The homogeny will also help you do something that stands out. And that, I think, if you look at things in an optimistic way, you're more apt to get, like, the results that you want.
You did that thing of twisting it into something inspiring. Well done. Classic work.
Mine was probably, I don't know how, I know quite a few people that work there. In fact, the person that I worked on the shoes with was someone I worked with at Umbro doing shoes, so it was actually quite an easy sort of slot in on that. And it was just like Fraser, who's here, who I used to be the shop boy at Hit and Run many years ago, folding up T-shirts and brushing the floor, and works there as well.
Fraser's
So
that guy there. The kid with the dreads is Fraser. You want to do a Nike collab?
So
I'm just saving the real guys.
You know, it just happened like that.
The real guy's about to get bum rushed. Fraser's going to need security soon.
And, you know, that's how it came about. And obviously, you know, I chose a shoe that wasn't really talked about that much, which is an LWP, which was one of my favourites. And it took me years and years to find a pair of them. And I found them in a bargain bucket in Miami.
Wow.
One was slightly faded, one wasn't. But I still wore them. And it was like, that's when it was really hard to find stuff. And
But how long did you work on yours for?
I don't know, I can't remember, because it's, a year maybe.
Because yours was quite a quick
she's a
turnaround,
year.
wasn't it?
Yeah, it was an
it's a different process.
experimental project all around. But to the kids that are sort of like, I know there's talent. There's probably like 6 kids in here that will get a future Nike collab. And the door is open. As you can tell, look at these 4 days of activations just to like have a dialogue. That's the first sign that Nike is progressive in terms of like working with outside influences. And I say it all the time, it always comes through authenticity and conversation. It's rarely going to come from like a pitch. Doing great work and sort of standing out and making something that is progressive to what Nike's values are, but also relates to this homogenous new community. You guys know what they don't know, but then they know how to make they know how to make the Nike you love. If you want to participate, it's like a resume. You know, you have to do work and it has to resonate. And the conversations are easy. You know, I've known this mythical person called Fraser for longer than I've done Off-White. And we're just as much friends over music than actual sneakers. You know, and I think the talk yesterday with Nate Joe was about, you know, more than half of his team never went to shoe school, you know, economics major. So it's about standing outside of the homogenous thing. Like, these dream opportunities of working with a brand like Nike exist for everyone. It's like, again, I think, so awful. My whole thing is like an art practice. It's when it comes to clothing or fashion, it's only like 20% of what my brain sort of like thinks about. And for me, long story short, is like our generation, streetwear a little bit, sort of deals off this like equity of irony. Like things that are ironic are funny. You know, memes. It's a cultural, like it's a cultural thing. It's a thing that specifically now, without like getting too deep into it. And my thought practice through doing other projects initially with irony was so jokey that it ended up all the way with like drippy hashtags and like a Rocky Horror picture font. That's not good design. You know, that's why a project like Ben Trill or Pyrex Vision doesn't exist. Like, because I'm always like striving to reach for more. It's like I always say that with streetwear, I don't want like Alexander McQueen, rest in peace, to be like rolling over in his grave that like a kid like me is now showing. Like, I'm very respectful to design. So the quotes, it's my language. It's ready-made. Same thing as if you look up Duchamp and he took a urinal and like frames it as art. I literally was like, you know, I can make something out of anything. And I'll take even a keyboard, find a way that is a universal tool for everyone, and make something that's mine. So it's being ironic, but it's also I get to say two things at one time. It's a paraphrase. So it's like figure of speech. I can describe a bag as a bag, or I can say it's a sculpture. And then when you read it, you have to think twice. But when I say it's art practice, you know, it's like Lou's involved. Like 2019, I'm doing a show at the MCA, which is an institution on art. It's not like a fashion. So for me, it's like in order for me to put things out in the world, that's a part of this like 20 layers of it has to have a reason for existing than just.
But it's also the modern way to do stuff.
Yeah, think.
You know, it's like you don't think on one platform, it's got to be across everything.
Yeah.
If not, it doesn't. You know, cultural relevance is much more important than fashion relevance.
Exactly.
And you know, the old school fashion people respect you as well as the young school, which is really interesting because it's like there's very few people that have started up recently that get that kind of credit as well.
That's very true.
It's not, and I stress this too, a lot of us could be like, hey, we're young, kick down the door, what we're doing is relevant. There's an enormous amount of history that predates us, just from the year 2000. You know, like look up Jun Takashi Undercover Collection. If you look at every one, it sort of like makes me think that I should quit, you know? It's deep, and there's a lot, and I think that, you know, there's a history, fashion history is so rich, and it's not just because we're new and able to have lineups that we deserve to be here.
I always laugh though when I say I was jealous of Virgil's collaboration, is because I wish I had done it like that, because I think it's so good. It's a compliment, it's not like a hate thing.
Architecture is sort of like I went and I had that quintessential moment that many people might have had, like the professor thought he was like super cool and like running it like a boot camp. And the first thing is like, oh, welcome freshmen, you know, only 2% of you are actually going to be practicing architects. I was like, nice one. It's like, that's original, you know, but I was more like, oh, I didn't come here to be an architect. You know, that was like, I came here to learn how to design. I didn't know how to design. That's something that I thought was like design with a capital D. I didn't know what that was. And basically, I went to architecture school for the way of thinking. And the long story short, it's like, if you're an architect, you just don't build buildings for yourself. You know, it's not like art. You can just paint a painting for yourself, move on to another one. You build a building with constraints. There's a client, they have how many bedrooms, they have this many kids, and they want to, you know, have tea in the morning. That tells you where the kitchen should be. That tells you how many car garage it should be. It tells you where. So that's what architects do. It's not like you think and you overthink and you provide a solution. So you can probably, like just that spiel, you can probably see how my fashion, it's like I think about each portion. I think about, you know, I do the Instagram myself. I think about what that communicates. And that's where the quotes came. It's like, I'm tired of comment, you know, it's like so boring. Like, we're only going to Instagram for how many more years? I'm going to try to invent a style of speaking on it so that you understand the style of clothes all the way to the end. But I'm interested, your fashion, you went to, what school did you go to?
Well, I went to St. Martin's and did the MA, but I didn't do fashion before that, and I just took a portfolio to show Louise Wilson, who is probably one of the toughest people you'd have ever met. She died, unfortunately, but she was really tough, but also very funny, but also just inspired you to get on with it.
Yeah.
And, you know, I just had a vision of what I wanted to do, which was something that me and my friends couldn't find in stores at the time. So we just, you know, I learned how to pattern cut and sew within a year and a half and just did it.
I'm going to ask Kim questions now.
No, don't.
Leave me out.
It's about you. It's about you, Virgil. It's about you.
Nothing. This light's too bright.
But it's interesting because you both think about fashion design in some ways like providing a service, which a lot of people who make clothes don't think about it like that.
Is providing a service. When kids were in St. Martin's, because like I love the camaraderie. All my friends are designers, you know, like that's what we do. Was it like that?
Yeah.
Like, was it like, oh, so-and-so's got a brand, they wear it to the nightclub? What clubs were you guys going to?
Well, I mean, we were just working all the time. We were really fucking bored. It was like, because it was so tough, and it was like, if you didn't do what Louise, you know, like, you didn't finish on time, she'd come in and throw something at you, basically, or smear chocolate all over your folder. It was kind of pretty, I mean, it was like, I always got on with her, but it's like, you know, I had myself prepared, and I was working at Gimme 5 to pay to go there as well, so, you know, I was learning stuff there, because I was working on quality control, and all these different things. I'd been in different departments, so I'd see how things actually worked in the real world as well as doing it at college, so it gave me that sort of, I felt it was an advantage over other people because you could see how things were professionally made, or if you wanted to manufacture something, so I became a bit boring in that thing. I just wanted to work and get it all done, and I just did it.
Were those early, like, were you at MA in school, were you doing like street ideas?
Yeah, I mean, I've still got the whole collection, actually. Yeah. It's like, I've got half of it because John Galliano bought the other half, and it was like, I did
casual
this exhibition.
Cool.
It was kind of like, that was like, I spent ages making this blazer, and I was really upset that it was sold to him, but it was kind of like, you know, that's an amazing opportunity for something to happen.
Put
and
it
it was
in
just
perspective,
like, you know, just I learned, you know, I actually made the wool and then felted it and then dyed it and then sewed it together, and so it was something that, you know, it's the first thing that I'd actually made from scratch, so it was like the thing that meant the most to me at the time, and it would be nice to have. And, you know, so it was just, you know,
to buy it back from him.
Yeah, I don't know if he's got it, but
I'm sure he does.
It's like, but, you know, it's just that thing of just, you know, it was, you know, because I was working at the time, it was that thing of just like, you can make this many of something, so I made a couple of things, and it was just, I was I've always been quite organised. I always like to, you know, have everything sort of properly done, and even at college I'd like to get everything properly done, and if I didn't know what I was doing, I mean, that's one thing, I always listen to people, and I always ask questions, because if you don't ask, you don't find out, and it's like, even if you know, think you're going to look stupid in front of someone, it's important to ask it. Yeah,
and speaking of Louise, you know, the MA at St. Martin's, you probably know, like, the designers that came out of her coursework.
It's insane.
It's like,
I did that MA as well, and she's terrifying.
Yeah, McQueen to Phoebe Philo to, you know, Ricardo, all the, like, one professor basically laid the groundwork for fashion industry as we know it. But what I think is we're like wrapping up and like is that, you know, Kim came out of that and represented like the one cultural sort of nucleus that we all live our everyday in. So you were like, you know, that's an early, throughout her system, it's important to note that Louise fostered it for him and myself.
I mean, she's, I mean, even with Kanye, she was very close with him, and it's like, you know, she was like, you don't need to do this, and, you know, you can just get on with it yourself, but just, you know, don't fuck around, and, you know, she wouldn't mess around with anybody.
But I think why I want to stress that point is like she's seen everything, and at the end of towards the end of her life, the last year was preoccupied with what basically we were pushing towards the forefront, and she agreed. I think, you know, with the LVMH prize, she was like, you know, the last time I saw her, she was very much like, you know, she thought it ludicrous that I had actually wanted to get an MA. She was like, you already know. And of course, in our vein, it's like, is this living up to all the great things that you've seen before? And I think she felt that this was new, and then this should be like ushered to the forefront.
I mean, when I went, my interview was, she said, you don't need to do it. And I said, I just want to have the year and a half of having time to develop my own thing myself and not have to, you know, think about it in other ways. So she was, you know, then she was like, oh, I think you're arrogant. I was like, no, I just want to do it. And it's like, I was like,
she could flip it on you super fast.
And it was like, and so, you know, then I got the place. But, you know, she understood that every sort of, you know, not everyone had to go through college, which is something which is so expensive now for a lot of people. And it's like, you know, go and intern with someone, go and talk to them, and, you know, don't be afraid of asking, because I mean that's one thing I've always done is if you don't ask, you don't get, and what's the worst thing someone can say is no. And I think that's a really important thing for people to think about. I mean, it's like, you know, I think I sent off 3 things when I graduated from college, and it's like the first one that got back to me was Vuitton, and I did some stuff with the guy there at the time, and I saw it and I thought, God, I'd always love a job like this.
Yeah.
And then 10 years after I graduated, that was the job that I had. So
Yeah.
Pretty inspiring note to end on.
Yeah.
Any more nice comments to say to each other at this big love-in?
I think we've done enough.
We're good. If everyone can join me in
But
giving
congratulations, Virgil.
massive round of applause.